Welcome to Measure Up, the podcast for transformational school leaders, where you'll learn to make better decisions through better measurement. Hi, and welcome to Measure Up, the podcast for transformational school leaders. I'm Nicole Alioto, CEO of Alioto Consulting and author of the new book, Your School Sucks, Why Schools Fail to Measure Up and What to Do About It. Now, I wasn't going to start this new podcast series with this topic. However, over the past week, I've had so many examples of problem measurement practices come my way that I just couldn't ignore it any longer. Now, the topic we'll talk about today does relate to the section of the book around good data going bad, particularly the subject related to a lack of measurement training. There have been many occasions over the years where people will come up to me with a data set that came from a survey and they ask me for help interpreting it. However, when I get the data and see that it came from a poorly designed survey, I kind of feel like the character Winston Wolfe from Pulp Fiction. You know who I'm talking about? It's the character where he comes in and helps clean up the messes that other people make. Well, the messes aren't that life or death like in Pulp Fiction when we're dealing with survey data. However, I do feel like my role is to handle the crimes against data, so to speak. Now, it might sound a little dramatic to have that comparison, but when decisions are based on these poorly obtained data, they do affect students' futures, staff and their work, maybe even their careers. And also, I look at it as a misuse of public funds. I mean, you're using public dollars to do these surveys that are poorly designed and lead to bad decisions. So it's pretty bad all around. This fixer uses fewer F-bombs than Winston Wolfe, but I'm just as passionate about good results. So let's think about an Olympian athlete that makes things look pretty easy. Okay. A good survey can seem easy to replicate, but have you tried to do a triple axel lately? Maybe do a dive off of a 3-meter platform. It's not as easy as the experts make it look. And the same can be said for surveys. Now, I know just about everybody has access to some sort of survey design tool or polling software. However, it doesn't make them a survey design expert. Now, I own a few hammers, but that doesn't make me an expert in construction. I could create something using my hammer. However, it's probably more likely that whatever it is I create, it'll take more time and money to undo what I did wrong and to get it done right. Same rules apply for your survey design work. So for today's podcast, I wanted to help you identify some best practices when designing a survey or maybe evaluating somebody else's survey you're thinking about using. Now, I know not everybody's going to come to us, so Alioto Consulting, for their survey needs. However, I do invite you to because we'd love to help you with that. But if you don't come to us, I just can't sit back and keep seeing garbage results as a result of garbage survey design, because that leads to poor decisions for your school community. Let's talk about this first topic when it comes to survey designs, and an issue that appears quite often is the idea of a survey midpoint. So you have a scale and there is a midpoint provided that might be labeled neutral or neither agree nor disagree. What's the point of a midpoint on a survey? And I do ask that when I do see it. And usually the excuse I hear is that, oh, well, we need to have an option for someone when they have mixed feelings or they really don't have an opinion about the topic. Well, why are you asking the question if that person doesn't have an opinion? If they're truly your stakeholders and have a perspective that you're looking for information on, why are you asking them? Is it the wrong audience? Or is it a bad question? Maybe it's not applicable to them. So not applicable. All right. If they truly don't have an opinion because they're not sure or it doesn't apply, then provide that response option. NA, not sure, don't know, doesn't apply. Um, for example, if you're asking students a question about their experiences and you ask them about their experiences on the bus, yet they don't take the bus, you don't want them picking neutral because they didn't take the bus. You want them to pick not sure, don't know, doesn't apply, or whatever response option you provide of that nature. Now, if it is something that you are asking to the right people and it's the right kind of question, then a 4 or a 6 point scale with that not applicable option is sufficient to get that array of strongly agree to strongly disagree, because you have the stronglys, you have the agrees, and then you have, or disagree, and you have the somewhats. So you get a range of perspectives, and it gives people flexibility, because if you're asking them these questions, then you expect them to have some sort of opinion about it or some sort of feeling about it. And if they truly don't, then give them an option out. Typically, when the midpoint is added, a lot of people will gravitate toward it. They'll go toward that default option of neutral or something that's in the middle. When the midpoint is added, I've seen a lot of people just default to that option. I mean, if 55% of your staff is responding at the midpoint for a question, are they really neutral? Are they not willing to share their feelings about what you're asking? Maybe because they don't trust administration or whoever is the sponsor of the survey. Or are they just selecting the midpoint to be done? That has a required question, so boom, 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 let's just answer neutral or the midpoint the whole way through. Well, who knows what the real reason for it is? And if we don't know the reason for it and we have multiple potential options for why they're picking neutral or the midpoint, then how is that informative? How is that giving us insight that we can act on with any sense of accuracy based on that midpoint finding? Recently, I saw a survey where the midpoint was labeled as somewhat. Somewhat what? Somewhat agree, somewhat disagree. Um, there was no information. It was just somewhat. So right away, without having a clear label, some people might look at that and answer as, well, I somewhat disagree. And some people will be like, well, I somewhat agree. Well, which is it? You're opening this up to interpretation, which means you're opening yourselves up to errors. Why do I keep referring back to errors? Because when we're having more error or lack of clarity in our survey design, and therefore a lack of clarity in the survey responses, then it's going to lead to inaccurate insights and poor decision making. So when I looked at the items that were getting a lot of those somewhat or midpoint selected responses, I started to find something, a pattern, if you will. I saw that they violated the Schoolhouse Rock rule. For those that grew up with Schoolhouse Rock like I did, you might recognize a conjunction junction. What's your function? The song discusses the uses of and, but, and or. Now, if you see a conjunction in one of your survey item statements, 9 times out of 10, you're going to get some errors. When you have and, but, and or, you'll have multiple ideas within your statements. So it's hard to tell when somebody's answering on the agreement scale, what part of that statement do they agree or disagree with? Well, if it's confusing, guess what? They're going to default to the midpoint, or they're going to skip it. And does that really tell you what they feel about any of it? No. Now, recently I came across a patient feedback form. Okay, well, it's not a school setting, but it's the type of error that I also see in school surveys. And since this one was so recent, I thought I'd just grab a little part of it and share it with you here today. Here it is. So it says, as a reminder, include information you've received before and on the day of the procedure. There's our conjunction. Did the doctors and nurses explain? There's a conjunction. So what if the doctors were great the day before and the nurses were great the day of, but not vice versa? I mean, there's so many different slices of this question set, and this is just one question in a series. So what is it? What am I really answering? And when I do provide an answer, how do you as a decision maker know who did what well and when? Well, you need to separate those out. Anytime you see a conjunction like that, again, 9 times out of 10, we'll talk about that 10 out of 10, but there's too many things there. So it's going to be unclear as to what your respondents are actually telling you about, and then it'll be even harder to act on it because it could be either or. Now, in the case of the midpoint in that school survey that I looked at, and I questioned, why do we keep seeing the midpoint as being the dominant selection for a set of items? Well, it turned out that I found myself in conjunction junction. A lot of those items where you'd have over 50% of people responding to the midpoint had some sort of conjunction. So it was hard to know, well, how should they respond? Maybe they did have mixed feelings. And so they just said, I don't really know how to respond to this, so I'll just pick the middle. Now, when that happens, does that really give accurate information that helps your school? Here's an example. Teachers and students feel welcomed and part of this school. We got a double conjunction here. Teachers and students feel welcomed and part of the school. Now you might say, well, welcomed and part of the school are kind of the same thing. Okay, well, if they are kind of the same thing, then pick one. Don't have both. And teachers and students, well, the teachers feel welcome or the students feel welcome? Or both, or neither? I don't know, because if 50%, in this case, it was actually over 50% chose the midpoint, because, well, what are you really responding to? How is that giving me anything useful? Now, with over 50% choosing the midpoint, how will that provide you as a school leader the information you need to make good decisions? Again, going back to that, why do we even have a midpoint when somebody says, well, if they have mixed feelings about it, well, if there are too many things in the question, yeah, they're going to have mixed feelings because they don't know what you're asking about. Make sure your statement is clear so that there isn't a mixed feeling to be had. And if it's truly something that they're not sure about, give that not sure option. Don't allow them to place their sentiment on your continuum if they really don't have a response. All right, so what about that 10 out of 10? When might a conjunction be okay? Let's think of an item where you're just using a phrase, such as checks and balances. All right, that's just an expression or a phrase that is common and it goes together. It's not really you're asking about checks separately from balances, but you're using that as an expression in total. Another example might be if you're asking about a set of something and then giving the example in parentheses. So maybe you're asking a question around core subjects, and then you give that qualifier of what your core subjects are, and that's English and math and science and social studies. Well, there's an and in there, but it's the description of the set. Your question's really focusing on it as a set. You're not asking for the specifics around each subject area. So that might be where you would see a conjunction that doesn't detract, but 9 out of 10 times you don't need that conjunction in, and keep the midpoint out. You're asking your students or staff, your parents, your community, your stakeholders what their perspectives are. You're designing a survey that is based on constructs that are relevant to your audience, so you don't need that midpoint if you want to get quality information to act on. So I hope today's episode helped you recognize where error can enter into your survey project and how to reduce some of it at the onset. As always, I'm here to help. You can reach out to me at hello@alabreveconsulting.com and put measure up in the subject line. And if you haven't got a copy yet of my new book, head over to Amazon and grab one. I'd appreciate it. And if you do have one, please leave a review. That would be helpful for me as well as to others who are looking for a book that will help them make better decisions for their school communities. Thanks for joining today. And next time, we will be starting our multi-part series on the New York State Blue Ribbon Commission report. See you next time and have a significant week. If you found something useful in this episode, please like, comment, and share, or leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to this podcast. Thanks.